Welcome to Gnostic Warrior Radio, broadcasting from GnosticWarrior.com in San Diego, California, to around the world. Today we have the pleasure of having a discussion with master alternative researcher and original American author, Lloyd Pye. Lloyd is best known for his alternative knowledge that is rooted in mainstream science and promotion of the human-alien hybrid skull known to the world today as the Starchild Skull. He has done extensive work and is also an expert on the human ape-like creature known as Bigfoot. Lloyd has made many television appearances in support of his ideas on the Learning Channel, the National Geographic Channel, Extra, Animal Planet, and Richard and Judy in the United Kingdom. He is the author of a fully revised eBook and a new 2011 DNA Results Starchild Skull Essentials, and another eBook, the original Everything You Need to Know Is Wrong. In addition to his incredible work, Lloyd is also offering his great knowledge to the world, where he is co-leader of a tour to Peru this August 5th through the 17th or the 21st with Brian Forrester of Ancient Aliens fame and Mr. Conehead Skulls. With Lloyd Pye's infamous Starchild Skull and Brian Forrester's work on the Coneheads, this tour to Peru will be very unique and groundbreaking. You can find out more about the tour to Peru and the Starchild Skull at Lloyd's websites at starchildproject.com and lloydpye.com. Okay, enough of the formal introductions, Lloyd, and I'm excited to hear from you today. How are you doing?
Well, I'm doing good, Mo, and let me update a little bit on that introduction. No problem. The both ebooks, the Starchild Skull Essentials and Intervention Theory Essentials that you mentioned have actually, you mentioned 2011, those are now the 2013 versions. The beauty of ebooks is, and why I prefer that medium now, is that you can make changes as needed and keep things updated and fresh with the latest information. One piece of which is very important is that the Starchild, we no longer consider it a human-alien hybrid. You mentioned that. We no longer consider it that. New evidence, new DNA research has shown clearly that it's just an alien. Always the problem with the Starchild, with that result from that DNA result from 2003 that said or indicated that the Starchild had a human mother and a non-human father. The problem was, from a physical standpoint, there was just no remnant of mom. Where did mom go? Where was the human part of it? Because there's just not a single feature, significant feature on the skull, or even insignificant, that matches exactly with a human. So it was very hard to explain how you could get a human-alien hybrid that didn't look at all human. So we were really, stuck with that explanation for several years until mid-2010, when finally some new DNA with the new techniques, testing was done with the new techniques, and those revealed that, in fact, there was no real link to humans, that the result in 2003, while the best available at that time, it was really the Stone Age of DNA analysis using primers relative to where they are now, in which they are able to take out literally every single base pair of the whole 3 billion base pairs in a genome and analyze it bit by bit. It's like pulling down every single brick in a skyscraper and being able to analyze and tell you each brick what it is, how it fits in the whole scheme of things. So the latest results make it clear the Starchild, when we can recover the whole genome, will be alien. We have no doubt about that. But the listeners should understand that of that 3 billion base pair genome, we have recovered about 200 million at this point. That's a lot. relatively speaking, but compared to the whole genome, it's still a small percentage, but it's more than enough to give us clear indications to extrapolate what the final result will be, and we have no doubt about it. We just have to get the money to do the whole genome recovery.
So your basis of calling this DNA alien and not a hybrid human DNA is because based on what you've extrapolated thus far, it does not match up to any human DNA. And if this was any other skull that may be either...
No, it does match up to some, Mo, it does. But
okay.
So does everything. You have to understand, life is, I believe, ubiquitous, not only in our galaxy, but very likely in the universe. In other words, the same code, the same thing you see in everything on Earth is everywhere. And so the human genome has aspects in almost everything. For example, chimps have 97 to 98% the same genome that we have. Gorillas have 95%.
Can I interrupt you there real quick, Lloyd? Because I'm not an expert on DNA, and I know a lot of people aren't.
Sure.
Does that mean that we're related to chimps if they share 98, or does that mean we just are made of the same stuff?
No, that means that we all share the same life code, the same genome. The same base pair arrangement, the same 4 bases that make up all of life on Earth. All of life on Earth make up all of life everywhere is what we think.
So just like Carl Sagan had said, we're stardust. We're made of. That would be just like if there was any other planet with life, they would be made of the same thing. That's only common sense.
The idea, the standard mainstream idea that everybody's taught in school about the warm pond of Darwin's warm pond of water being struck by a lightning bolt or a number of lightning bolts, and somehow the inorganic materials are swirled together to form the first living thing from which all things subsequently evolve. Everybody that has any education at all now in genetics and DNA understands that that's just pure garbage. The reason that they keep pushing it and keep teaching it and keep selling it is because they don't really have an alternative for it yet. And if they don't keep selling that, then they have to allow creationists to jump up and down and raise their hands and say, well, if you don't know, it could be God, and nobody really wants that, including me. So they're kind of given a pass on this fantasy, which is really no different than the fantasy that God did it all in 6 days and all that. When you really want to get to the truth, you have to look below those two, beyond those two banalities, and look for something else. And the something else is going to be found in the middle ground, and that's going to be intervention. And that's how life came to be on Earth. Intervention, clearly, no doubt about it. Things just appear here. And they appear here when they need to appear in the forms that they require, that the planet at the time requires, to turn it into the Earth as we know it. This is what my ebook, Intervention Theory Essentials, is about, and what my book, Everything You Know Is Wrong, is about. It deals with these issues about how did we really get here? How did the solar system, how did Earth, how did all really happen, and get away from all the fantasies from the two warring fantasy sides and seek out the truth in the middle ground. And the truth is that we all share the same basic life code. And as I was saying, chimps are 97 to 98% the same as us. Gorillas are 95% the same genome, 3-something billion base pairs for all of us. Rats have about 70% the same as we do, which is why they use, and mice too are in that range, why they use those in labs to do testing for drugs that will ultimately be tested on us, because we have similar enough genomes to get remotely similar effects. Again, mice are like 65%, but you can go down to yeast, yeast mold, and that has about 20% the same. We all share that same code. So the Starchild has from what we recover, basically in the range of between 10 and 50% is the same. And it's staggering, 10 to 50%. It's less than mice. It's less than rats. It's less than dogs and cats. It's the Starchild is radically different from the pieces that we've recovered relative to humans, relative to chimps, relative to Neanderthal, relative to anything that's of a higher primate nature. The Starchild is substantially below that in terms of its similarity, the similarity of its genome to humans.
So the chimp and those kind of species that we find here on Earth, you're saying that because this skull, the Starchild skull, doesn't have similar DNA makeup of that of the human, it makes it of a different origins from Earth.
Right. It's very
Gotcha.
unlike. It's not Earth-like in terms of its genetic profile as we're recovering it when you compare it to things that are from Earth, and particularly to higher primates. So if you've got something that is coming in well below higher primates, monkeys, and monkeys as well, which this does, the Starchild does, you're looking at an. People say frequently, well, how are you going to be able to prove it's an alien? How can you say it's not an alien? Now, it isn't us proving that it is an alien. It's the other side being able to say with a straight face, that it isn't an alien.
It's almost up to them to prove it because you have the evidence of it. And
it's up to us, Mo. It's up to us to recover the whole genome. But once we do, then it'll be up to them to prove that what we've done is wrong and that what we have concluded is not an alien. So,
what's been your largest obstacle in doing that? Has it been money or just DNA science?
No, it's strictly, it's two things. It's money, and it's the resistance of the mainstream to this knowledge. This is not something they want proved or they want to deal with. They have a fantastic propaganda machine that makes most people think that, they're just always up for any change at all that anybody can come up with. They're always, we're right there on the leading edge. We want to know anything new, and that's just total garbage. Anything they don't want to deal with is anything that's going to upset a major paradigm in a comprehensive way. Science likes little teeny tiny baby steps forward. They like these little teeny tiny baby steps that everybody within their community can handle, psychologically, emotionally, academically, the whole 9 yards. Something that leaps forward into a new dimension, into a new reality, just upends everything. They will not. They don't want that, and they will fight that tooth and nail, as they do with the idea of alien reality. They say, that would be a great thing. We'd really like that. Yeah, we're doing SETI and we're trying to find radio code, but they're not here now. We don't have to worry about that. There's so much that will cause them problems to deal with that they just are putting it off. Those who sit in the power chairs, you got to understand, there's the rank and file. Some of them are into it, some of them are not, but they all have to be very, very careful about letting their peers know that they have an interest in it. But everybody that sits in their power chairs, in the mainstream power chairs, whether they're interested in it or not, they will work as hard as they can to maintain the status quo as it is so that their life flows on normally day to day and there are no big upheavals. But the big upheaval is coming, and there's no doubt about it. The big upheaval is coming.
And it seems like that, Lloyd. I don't do much research into this area, and I've looked at a lot of what you've done, of course, in preparation for this interview. And then also, it seems like disclosure is coming, and they're slowly prepping the masses for it. Because for all we know, the government or various governments around the world could know exactly what you're talking about, know exactly where these people or these aliens come from, and they might have a vault filled with thousands of these skulls and so forth. And they really do it, like you had said, kind of as far as the propaganda machine to keep the masses kind of happy and status quo. Do you think that is because people can't handle the truth, meaning people not like you, Lloyd, or myself, who seek out the truth and aren't afraid of it no matter what, whether we're an alien ourselves or whether we're related to the chimps? We just want to know the truth. And do you think that our system is set up for the masses that can't handle the truth?
No, I don't think that's it at all. It's not that the masses can't handle the truth. It's that the mainstream scientists can't handle the truth. Even religion can handle the truth. Religion just, all they have to do is adjust their scenario to just say God has a much wider reach than just the earth. God is everywhere. God is everything. God is the universe. And, religion, that'll hardly be a bump in the road for religion. And government as well. They're still going to be in charge. They're still going to be running things. It isn't that it's going to damage government in any way. The only people that are really going to suffer from this, and it's just going to be a really big black eye that's going to last for a long time, is mainstream science. The ones who've been insisting it can't be true, and suddenly it's true. That's pretty embarrassing, and it's going to be hard to live down. But they will, of course, get very busy doing that, and they will try to come up with ways to say, oh, yeah, one of our guys knew this already. Look, this guy was already taught. They'll go back and they'll comb the files, and they'll find any mainstreamer who was saying the kind of things that we're saying, and they will take credit for it. That's how they do. They can't let themselves be knocked out of their catbird seat. So black eye and all, they're just going to, red faces and all, black eyes and all, they're just going to suck it up and say, wait a minute, we did it first. It was our idea. We did anything here that we didn't know already. And before you know it, it's a big lie. It's a big lie. They will tell that lie enough so that it will become forgotten that they really were the anchor dragging everything back and keeping everything from moving forward. And then they'll just have to get on board and learn how to cope with the idea of intervention as a theory rather than and ditch Darwinism, and they'll just make it their own. That is what they do.
Yeah, let's get into intervention, because that's a favorite subject of mine, and I know this is something you're very knowledgeable in. Intervention, can you describe that to us, basically what it means to you and your theory on it?
Well, it just means that Earth is not a naturally occurring planet. Earth is a manufactured planet. It is terraformed from pretty much day one of its existence. If you look at reality out in space, a planet is forming. It's swirling around no matter what it's made of initially, seething lava, whatever. In space, there's no air. It's freezing cold. And so all that's going to happen is that planet is going to turn into a cold, dead rock, as are most of the planets in the solar system. And if they're not cold, dead rocks, they're seething rocks, but they're not capable of sustaining life as we understand life and as life probably has to exist everywhere. Okay? So how do you make a planet like Earth that fits in what's called the Goldilocks zone? The zone of the sun where it's going to have the things that are required in terms of temperature for life, for higher life to sustain itself. How do you make that happen? Well, you have to take a number of very important steps from the beginning of that planet's formation. You have to load it up in the early beginnings of it with what are called prokaryotic bacteria. And prokaryotic bacteria are bacteria that use the chemicals and the byproducts of what's going on with the formation of the planet, with the lava and all that. They eat that, the sulfur, the other compounds that are coming up. They are anaerobic, many of them, and so in their process of life, they produce oxygen. They eat what's there, and they produce oxygen. You have to have that, prokaryotic bacteria. And then add what is the oxygen for? It's not for us life to breathe in the beginning, no. Iron is one of the most abundant elements in the universe, from all anybody can tell. Iron is everywhere. It's in the meteorites that come to Earth. It's dominant. So on a planet that's going to have life, you have to tie up the iron. Why? Because it reacts very, very rapidly with oxygen. It ties up the oxygen and turns iron into rust. So in the beginning of your planet, you have to have the oxygen turn the free iron into rust. Guess what? Exactly what happened on Earth. Exactly. We get 2 loads of prokaryotic bacteria that are completely different from each other. You have the eubacteria and the bacteria itself, and those produce enough oxygen to tie up all the free iron on the planet in about 2 billion years. And at the end of the 2 billion years, now they're putting oxygen into the water, and the oxygen from the water begins to creep out into the atmosphere, and it ties up with some of the methane there, and you get a snowball Earth, where the entire Earth is covered with ice, like imagine the Arctic over the whole planet. And so underneath that ice, bubbling like a cauldron, are the life processes continuing with the eukaryotes and a new creature called, the prokaryotes and a new creature called the eukaryotes. And they're, again, one-cell bacteria, but they're much bigger, much more complex. And on it goes. Every time Earth needs a new step, it gets what it needs in the form that it needs it to continue shaping the planet, terraforming the planet, making it ready to host and receive higher life forms. And those keep coming, starting with, you get to the point of the Cambrian explosion. And, nobody in the mainstream even argues. It's the Cambrian explosion is so obviously not evolution. It's so obviously that everything was just dumped here. I call it cosmic dump trucks. Something just came and dumped life here at about 500 million years ago by carloads, by truckloads, by tanker loads of life, hundreds of species, thousands of species into the water. And you go from these multi-celled I've got eukaryotes stuck in my head. Ediacaran fauna, multi-celled ediacaran fauna, you go from those that dominate for about 50 million years to the Cambrian explosion, which is just, relatively speaking, overnight, a few tens of thousands to maybe 1 million years. Nobody's really sure. You can't date them, but they just suddenly they're there in the fossil record. They're just there, and it's predators.
What are those?
It's predators and prey. It's males and females. It's just about every phyla, nearly every phyla that we have today comes then all at once. That's not evolution. Everybody knows this. Everybody in the mainstream knows this. They know that I'm right and they're wrong. But it's just a dogma that they have to protect and defend against the religious people who insist that if science doesn't have their ducks in a row, why not consider God? Why not teach God did it all and all that? And again, nobody wants that. That's not good for anybody. I'm not for that either. But I am for the truth, which is the middle ground, which is intervention theory.
If these, I'm assuming that, of course, when you say they just dropped these animals into the ocean, these mammals, and of course here we are today.
No, not mammals. Not mammals. No mammals living underwater at that time. Okay. So they were all not. Mammalia was not one of the phylum that were then. That had to come later when the land was ready to go. First, the water was ready to go. First, the water had enough oxygen, and then the atmosphere and the land. But then you had to create an ozone layer. I left that out, but that's another thing you have to do is create an ozone layer above the planet so that all life forms can live on land and the first couple of feet of the water. Because if you don't have an ozone layer, too many deadly rays come in from the sun. And again, that all that was needed to create the ozone layer was provided in the time that it needed to be provided. That's why I'm sure that the Earth was terraformed, and the terraformers themselves, whatever they are, they don't have a scale of time that we understand time. They don't have, time is not an issue for them, because they can come and look at a forming solar system like they looked at ours, and they said, probably these 3 planets here might be in the zone of life. Let's go ahead and sprinkle them with prokaryotes and then we'll come back in a billion or so years and see how it's doing, and we'll adjust. So, a couple billion years later, they come back, they do more, then they come back and they do more. They don't have time as we understand time.
Which makes sense, because, of course, to us, a year in our lifetime seems like a long time, and then, of course, as we get to the end of it, we realize how short it is.
Right.
But if we study into the intervention theory, if you say they intervened in life, wouldn't they be intervening at all levels right now, as far as the government as well?
Well, I don't really know, because you've got the terraformers who are more interested in the macro development of the solar system, in my view, and the planet. That's the macro development. And then you have the Anunnaki and beings that are basically like us. They do have a sense of time. They are, born and live and die, just over a very much longer period of time than we do. We're built to die young, die early and be replaceable. That's when we were being created, and this is a whole nother subject. Is there's how was the planet formed, intervention, and then how did life come here, and that was intervention. Then how did we get here? And that's really the big one that upsets everyone, is how did we get here? We didn't evolve here. We were created here, genetically engineered. It's clear in our genomes, genetically engineered. And according to the Sumerian texts, and I have no reason to doubt it, we were created as slaves and servants of the higher beings that were creating us. And one of the things that nobody really, science, government, religion, nobody likes and is comfortable with the idea that we were created to be a slave and a servant, and therefore we were made grossly imperfect relative to what we could be genetically if we knew how to adjust our genome to correct the flaws and the faults that were put into us by those who created us, so that we would be good and obedient slaves and servants. And so they dumbed us down, and they gave us the use of a very small portion of the brains that we carry in our heads, which are their brains, and they put in us a powerful urge to be obedient to authority, a powerful urge to worship gods. All of these things are in us, and in most people, those genes function properly, the way they were meant to function. People do have a sense of awe at the concept of God. People do have an innate sense of obedience to authority, and only a few of us are really faulty in that area of our genomes. I certainly have what I call a sheeple gene. The sheeple genes are the ones that make us behave the way our creators wanted us to behave, to be good slaves and servants. And so most people have well-functioning sheeple genes, and so they just nod and believe everything they're told by authority, and they don't question. There's a very rare few of us who have faulty sheeple genes, who didn't come out quite right the way the Anunnaki wanted us to, and we're the ones like me and like you who challenge the status quo, who are a pain in the neck for the authority figures around us. And that's just our lot in life. We did not get a proper sheeple gene.
Yeah, I agree with the sheeple analogy, because I myself was a sheeple, for many years, and kind of trying to find my way. But I also felt internal conflict, like I was two beings inside. You had the sheeple part, and then another part of me that was always at battle with the sheeple that I feel has overcome the sheeple now, is in control. And again, I don't know what that being is inside of me, but it seems to be leading me to doing work in this area. And I guess you would call us the martyrs in the past, the people that
we were the ones who would have been burned at the stake, no question. Right?
Why isn't it happening now?
Well, they would if they could. I mean, if science could get away with it, I would have been a marshmallow roast a long time ago. They can't do it anymore. But when religion could, they did. They killed everybody that got in the way. They challenged them and gave them any grief, whatever. If it was up to religion, they'd still be killing them. They'd still be burned scientists. So anybody that challenged the idea of God, only advancing civilization keeps that from happening. There are just people who are extremely simple-minded and want things to be simple, and they don't like complexity, and they fight and they work and they argue against it. I mean, I guarantee you know, and I know, and everybody listening knows people who they consistently say, I wish it was the way it was when I was coming up. I don't like all this change. Well, that's what being an old-timer, an old codger, or whatever is about. You don't like change. Well, that's all built into us. And most of us are just extreme, especially over the age of 50, and I'm well over the age of 50, but I've been this way for many years. But most people over 50 settle into a groove of complacency where they just want it the way it was as they idealize it when they were young, and they really fight for that. So change is anathema to most people, especially large change on a very grand scale. And that's what intervention theory represents. That's what the Starchild represents. That's what Bigfoot represents. That's what all of these things that are kept in a bottle, these genies that they don't want let out of the bottle, because it's going to change the fundamental design paradigm of our life and our belief system. And we need to go there. We need to move into the future. That's the future. And we need to go there. We need to do this. It would be a very good thing for us collectively as a species. But the drudges among us have to be overcome. And they carry a lot of weight because they tend to be the older people, the ones who are in the power chairs, and the ones who control most of the money. And that makes it really, really difficult to do the work that I do and others. I mean, I'm not the only one. But the work that we do, people like me, is hindered by that very, very conservative nature that everybody develops as they get older.
Which they're, the powers that be, they're in control, and usually they are the older money and the people that have been controlling the sciences and the universities and the governments for many years. But what I see around me and looking at it, Lloyd, I'm 41 now, and I've kind of been in the system for 41 years, of course, but I woke up a few years ago and I realized who I was, and how the system uses you, and we're essentially slaves that are controlled by money and taxes. It's just a different, instead of a gun and a sword and a whip, we have that controlling us now. But also, when I look around at our system, it seems like, how we used to build pyramids, that pyramid's built. It's almost like they don't need us to build all these factories and these corporations. The war machine's built. We're this massive superpower here in the United States that pretty much no one could beat us, and then we're aligned with various governments. It seems like the pyramid's built, and these truths that you're speaking of and that you could find on the internet, of course, a lot of disinformation. And I know I love that term you call Wikipedia, Wackipedia, which I agree. Just for this interview, I had 10 things wrong, and you corrected me before we went on the air. But I feel like disclosure is coming, and they want these truths, but of course they're going to keep the status quo. You're saying that it's not, but I kind of see a different side of the coin, saying that they want guys like us to bring it out, even though they're not going to support us. We're never going to get millions of dollars to do studies or a radio show. Myself, if I get good at it, I'm never going to be on Fox talking about this stuff. But that essentially this stuff is going to move to the forefront. And it'll eventually, hopefully in your lifetime, but maybe after this will be science, and this is it. And they're letting us do this.
Well, it's true. There is. You have to look at the different factions that are involved. Government is for it. I think government is for disclosure in the sense that they know that it's coming. The day is coming. There's going to be a UFO over a football stadium where 1,000 people with cameras can take pictures of it, and they can triangulate, and there'll just be no doubt. Or there will be some event that will happen that will just be so undeniable they can't do anything about it. And rather than have that occur in an unmanageable way. I think it works to the advantage of government to have it come out in dribs and drabs in movies, and that's why they help movies to be made about this. But they can't just do it overnight. What Starchild represents, I think, and one of the reasons I've been allowed to carry forward with it, is that it provides a really excellent halfway step toward full disclosure, in that it acknowledges that there was an alien on Earth that lived and died and was buried here 900 years ago. So you can satisfy those of us who want to move into the future with that as a truth. But the fact that it was 900 years ago and it was just one time allows the conservatives to say, oh, yeah, well, okay, one time 900 years ago, that doesn't mean anything about now. That doesn't mean they're here now. You see, so it allows them to continue to cling to those conservative values of not moving ahead and keeping looking to the past rather than looking forward. So it'll kind of split the population between those that want to move ahead and those that want to live in the past, but it will then, those who are looking to the past will continue to die out, and those who want to look ahead are going to be predominantly young people. They will still be around, so that when their generation comes up, it'll just be sort of an accepted thing. It's been known for a long time that every major change that occurs in science, every major change, always starts out, with being ridiculed and like we are right now, and then suddenly you can't ridicule it anymore. It's there, it's real, they have to accept it. So then about the young people all the old people that grew up not believing in it, not accepting it, they'll go to their graves not believing in it and not accepting it. They'll just die out. But the young ones coming up, that it's okay for them to believe it and accept it and look into it and research it, they will. And when they come up, that's the takeover. It takes about a generation and a half to 2 generations, about 50 years, from something to go from being anathema to being totally accepted by everyone.
No, I agree. And if you look at every scientist and usually major discovery or anything that's happened, it happens like that. There's people such as yourself who dedicate, parts of their lives and a major part of their lives to a study or pursuing a specific truth. And it's not usually till 50 years, 100 years, 200 years after they're gone that it becomes part of mainstream science and truth.
Well, I think unless I, die precipitously, I'm 66 now, if I get another, 10, 15, 20 years, it should all unfold within my lifetime, because the internet is moving things forward. That old thing about 50 years that I just quoted you, that was the standard before. The internet's going to speed that up exponentially so that it will it can and almost certainly will occur in my lifetime. We're going to do the Starchild in the next, year or two in that range. So once that's out there and established, there will be, I think, exponential leaps forward in other information coming out from under the woodwork. Once it's okay for mainstream scientists to deal with these kinds of issues, a lot of different things are going to change. Not just alien reality, but also the history of the planet itself. It's clear from the megaliths around the world, in Egypt, at Baalbek, in Peru, those megalithic structures, all of them speak to a very, very high culture living on the planet at some time in the past, and that culture has been wiped out, just wiped out. What happened to them? Well, the way the mainstream deals with it is, rather than acknowledge or accept that there was a culture as high as ours around the world at one point, and that it was decimated and wiped out, rather than live with that threat hanging over our heads, well, if it happened to them, it can happen to us kind of thing, they choose to pretend that those beings just didn't exist, that culture didn't exist, that primitive people built the pyramids and built the megalithic structures and all that, when even today, with the best work we can do, we can't duplicate those megalithic structures.
Do you think
anybody that says we can, lying, just absolutely lying.
Do you think we were the race that wiped them out?
Well,
or the hybrid?
I don't know that it's a race that wiped out. I think it was, there were beings here, maybe coneheads, maybe us, maybe both, but whoever was living here and under what structure they were in before, say, 7,000 years ago, and that culture got wiped out. And cultures prior to that. I think it's been a series of high cultures. And I think humans, as we are today, were a part of it. But I think that the wipeouts there, I think, were more physical things, like the planet, like the Great Flood. I think there was a Great Flood. Every culture has a history of a Great Flood. There is evidence of a Great Flood. I think a Great Flood occurred. Under what circumstances? Where, how, why, and when? We're still working, trying to figure that out. But something shaved the continents down to bedrock. Gigantic tidal waves, tsunamis, swept over the land, and all but the highest mountains that had people on them, everything was just decimated. And that's happened more than one time. So what are those events? What causes that? My guess is that we're hit by a very good-sized planetoid of some kind, planetesimal, out in the oceans, where the water goes up and creates these monster waves that roll around, slosh around the whole planet, and clean whatever's there off, except for those living at the highest elevations. And what do they have left? They've just got a memory of how it used to be. And then they have to try to build up from that point. And I think that when you look at the Sumerians and the first cultures that we acknowledge as historical for ourselves, all of them came just boom out of nowhere with very high memories of developed culture that they put into place immediately. I mean, Sumer was just an overnight. It had 100 of the first that we consider part of a high culture. It had 100 of those overnight. Just they started out with that. So where did that come from? That's a memory of the civilization, of the culture that existed when they were wiped out.
Lloyd, so these, like the Sumerians, as far as the culture, that this would be recorded written history as far as that we can go back today and find actual evidence of a people. Okay, gotcha. Yep. And there was no one prior to them that we could find? We
have the writings of the Sumerians in the cuneiform tablets. The problem you run into there is who does the translating. The mainstream translates anything that the Sumerians write that refers to UFOs or aliens or the other planet or anything like that. The mainstream people who do that translating, they immediately transform that into sounding like myths, like some kind of mythology, so that normal people can accept and tolerate it. But you have a guy like Zecharia Sitchin who writes a book like The 12th Planet and his other books, but start with The 12th Planet. And you see very quickly that there's a whole nother interpretation of what the Sumerians were actually writing, what they were really writing. And what they were really writing is about UFOs and aliens and another planet in the solar system with a long elliptical orbit and all that. Anybody that's interested in this can read either Sitchin's The 12th Planet, or if you'd like a more reduced version, you can read my Everything You Know Is Wrong, that book. But those are things that anybody interested in this stuff needs to start with if you can.
What do you know about the planet Jupiter? I've done some research in the past as far as one of the planets that was worshipped, and I always keep coming across Jupiter. Do you know anything about that, Lloyd?
Jupiter, Saturn, too. You can say the same thing about it. This is all part of the brainwashing of the masses, where when the Sumerians are talking about their own gods, their own literal living on the ground gods with a small g, they get turned into these anthropomorphic planetary gods. And, I just don't accept it. It's a clever way, it's a clever ruse to run on people, but I don't. They're talking about real people. And our mainstream translators turn it into, again, mythology. Oh, they're talking about Pluto, they're talking about Saturn, they're talking about this, they're talking about that. They're not talking about real people. That can't. Maybe, people don't have those powers and abilities, that sort of thing. So anyway, you have to educate yourself a lot more into the nuances of the struggle for the hearts and minds of ordinary people that goes on between the mainstream and those like me or like Sitchin or like other workers in the alternative field who are trying to get the truth out against this very well organized and heavily subsidized with money machine that creates and manufactures these lies and then just defends them to the hill.
What's your theory on the large head? I know the Starchild skull has a specifically large circumference brain area, and then also people today have various size heads. Do you feel that that brain size equates to intelligence, and even today, and that these beings were?
I do think that, but you've got it a little bit wrong. There's the human skull and brain, which has a range of size and shapes. There is the Starchild, which stands absolutely alone. There's nothing like it ever been found on the earth. Skulls, brains, nothing. Starchild is unique in and of itself. And then you have the coneheads. And the coneheads are found dominantly in Peru, but also in other parts of the world, some of the islands in the Mediterranean and Egypt. And coneheads are different. They're not human. They're not entirely human. They're different from human in that they have a brain that is literally twice the size of ours. We humans average about 1,400 cubic centimeters of brain in our heads. The coneheads rather carry between 2,500 and 3,000, with an average of about 28. So they've got massively larger brains than we have. And if you x-ray their heads, you see that's not water in there. That's brain, wall-to-wall brain. So they're not humans. Now, I should mention to your audience that in August of this year, in just a few months, I'm going to be co-leading a tour of Peru, of the major sites in Peru that are on everybody's bucket list. Machu Picchu, Sacsayhuaman, Ollantaytambo, the Nazca Lines, all of those wonderful, wonderful things that you can see in Peru that are just astounding. But my co-leader is going to be Brian Forster. And any of you listening that watch Ancient Aliens with any regularity have seen Brian several times. Anytime they do anything in Peru, Brian's right there, usually with David Hatcher Childress. And Brian is like Mr. Conehead now in the world because he has access and he has interest and he's educated himself about them. So one of the things that our tour in August will be doing is, in addition to those great megalithic wonders that everybody wants to see, we will also be paying special attention to the museums that hold conehead skulls. And we'll be doing a lot of discussion of life on Earth, life in the past. I'll be talking about things I've been talking about here and, of course, a lot more. And Brian will be bringing his expertise regarding the coneheads to whoever comes on the tour. So anybody that's interested in that, please get on it. Contact Brian at hiddeninkatours.com, www.hiddeninkatours.com, and you'll see the scenario for the trip every day. That'll be, all 12 days of the fundamental Peruvian trip are laid out, and then there are 4 additional days if you want to go on those to Bolivia to go to see Tiahuanaco and Pumapunca up on Lake Titicaca in Bolivia, and those are 2 of the great megalithic sites of the world, but particularly Pumapunca because it has those incredibly precise drilled grooves and holes that we couldn't do today. We could not do today. Anybody talk to any engineer, they'll say, "Oh no, we don't have that capacity for that level of precision." So, if you're interested in the true trip of a lifetime, not a trite, not a homily, not being trite, not a homily, trip of a lifetime, this trip to Peru if you can manage it. And very, very reasonably priced, by the way. Very. It's the same price I paid in 1994 when I went on a similar trip with Zechariah Sitchin as the leader. When Sitchin led a trip in 94 to Peru, I went, and it's the same price today that it was then because Brian lives in Peru. He has a Peruvian wife, and he's able to cut really good deals. So it's well worth it for those who have an interest in this sort of thing and have been looking for an excuse to have a real bucket trip adventure. This is it.
No, I agree, Lloyd, and especially to go to such a beautiful place with so much history and then to have experts such as yourself and then to get a price that's you got 20 years ago you can get today with Brian Forster and yourself. That would be great. I'm actually considering going myself. I have to get my wife to okay it or she has to come, and then I have my kids, so it gets expensive. But I think it's worth it, and we all need to travel more if we want to find out more about this alternative history, and I feel it does something to us. It changes us when we go to these places. So I might go myself, and I appreciate the time you've taken with us today, Lloyd. What's next for you besides this trip? What else do you have planned in the future?
Well, we're working on finishing the business aspects of what we need to do to create a nonprofit organization that will allow us to get funding to do the work we need to do with the Starchild and film the documentary of it and all that. So we're working on that right now more than anything because we really have all the partial DNA results that we can use or we need to convince people that this is worth putting money into. We just have to arrange it so that it's a tax write-off. And when we are able to do that, we'll proceed along that path. And in the meanwhile, we'll just be preparing for the trip. And I should mention there are only 30 seats available. So for those who are thinking seriously about it, you have to get your deposit in or your seat could be taken.
One last question before we go. Do you believe we're the product of the Nephilim? That's who we are today? That's mentioned in the Bible with the daughters of men and the sons of God?
I think those were the Anunnaki. I think that a lot of the Old Testament is a direct lift from the Sumerian tablets and their stories of the beginnings of life and all that. So if that story, the Old Testament, had to come from somewhere, and where it came from was the Sumerian telling of similar stories, and it's just kind of an editing job of cobbling together of different aspects of it. But the Old Testament is just retelling the story, the origin story, as the Anunnaki were telling it to the Sumerians.
Okay, great. Thank you for your time today, Lloyd. You could find Lloyd at Starchildproject.com and LloydPye.com.
Lloyd Pye, LLOYDPYE. It's easy to make it P-I-E. It's P-Y-E. Lloyd, LLOYDPYE.com, and Starchild Project, all one word, StarchildProject.com. And
great websites you have. You've done a lot of great work there,
tours,
too.
Hidden Inca Tours, HiddenIncaTours.com, Brian Forster.
Yeah, and I'll be sure to put these links along with the audio podcast and the video, and I'll be sure to send those to you, Lloyd. Thanks again for your time. Keep up the great work, and I'll try to make it to Peru, and anybody out there, do your best to make it out there and support Lloyd in any way you can. Thanks for your time today, Lloyd.
Thank you very much, Mo. Been my pleasure.
All right, take care.